Hey everyone, Brendan Snyder here. How are you? Thank you so much for joining me and welcome to an episode on how to best organize a music collection. So I get asked this question a lot, as you can imagine. I've got over 11,000 CDs, more than 250 box sets, several hundred records, cassettes, etc., you name it. So there's a lot in my collection and it can really become a juggle sometimes figuring all of that stuff out. So I thought I'd put a video here together for you where I can go through some insights into what I chose to do, cover key considerations that were made, determinations, allowing you guys to make your own decisions in the end about how best to organize your music collection. Now, before we get into the actual organizing aspect here, there are a couple things I want to address first. To start, location is key. And I can't really say that enough. You got to know the location and you got to really think about it in advance. This determines how much space you're going to have, how much you can put out on display, like what you can see in the background behind me there, and also how much it is you're going to have to store. As I mentioned, I've got 11,000 CDs, so it obviously can't all fit out here. So that's something you have to take into account. I have bigger spaces in the house than this one here, and those kind of things go into it as to why I chose this space versus another. I'm going to touch on that a little bit more in just a bit, but in selecting that space, another thing to consider is temperature control. You want to make sure that it's not too hot, too cold, doesn't get too much sun. You don't want to sun bleach your spines of your albums or however it is you have them on display, and certainly not prone to flooding. So I'm down in my basement and I've got this finished space that I could easily have done CD racks around the space and so forth. This wall making a great one here. But in the end, I decided that since this is a basement, and you can see the clean out pipe there, I was afraid, what if this space flooded, and opted not to put my stuff down here. Okay, so it's not to say that I totally didn't use some of the space down here. If we come over and open this up, I did put some boxes down here that have some CDs in it, but if you see, it's floating more than 4 inches off the floor, so if it did flood, I'd be okay. And another option I looked at was the guest room. So this space back here easily could have fit a nice amount of CDs in it, but of course, I would lose the guest room capacity and opted not to use the space. All right, in the end, I chose to go with a second floor space. This one is actually outside of my bedroom, but it just became a great space for the music. You can see on in there's the bedroom, but out here, this just makes a really great space, nice vestibule, and who doesn't want to walk through a room of music? Next, it's all about how you want to display the stuff. And so, do you want to do it on shelves the way I've got it back here? Do you want it in racks? You know, they have those ones that'll spin around and you can load CDs from different sides. It could be in a bin, so it's top loaded and you're thumbing through it like you might in a CD store. Or do you just want to have stacks of different things? All those things can play into how things are going to be on display, and you want to think about that. So once we've got these things determined though, you can finally get down to the best way to actually organize. And we start off here with step 1. I mean, this one here sounds like a no-brainer, but it's actually not as easy as it sounds. Do you want to do a complete alphabetization from A to Z, or do you want to go by genre? And a lot of people go back and forth on this. I'm one who decided to go via genre, and I break it down that way. It actually allowed me to group better, and because as you can see what's behind me, as the racks turn, or the shelves, I guess you want to call them, turn, things like that, I can actually break those down into different genres and so forth. And I'm going to touch a bit more on that in just a bit here. But for me at least, I broke it down into rock, glam metal, heavy metal, and alternative. You're gonna have different genres, that's cool, it's however you want to do it. But then you get into things like, do you group all of one band together and their solo albums together, or do you keep those separate? So even if you're doing all alphabetization, are you gonna put, Judas Priest under J, Rob Halford under H, or do these actually go together? If you decide that they go together the way that I like to do things often, we then have things like Glenn Tipton had a solo album, KK's Priest, so KK Downing has got his own version of it. And then we've got other lesser known members like Tim Ripper Owens. So where does it all stop? How do you decide what goes together and what doesn't go together? And again, that's just going to come down to your own personal preference. For me, sometimes I actually do group them together, and other times I choose to keep them separate. It just all depends. Case in point, I have Guns N' Roses and I have Slash. He goes together. I think of him, I think of Guns N' Roses, stuff like that. As far as Judas Priest is concerned, I'm okay with keeping Judas Priest separate and all the other solo albums separate from that. But again, that's me. Then it comes down to how you choose to alphabetize within that, right? So the thing is, do you do it the way that, maybe would typically be expected, alphabetizing by last name? Rob Halford goes under H. You can imagine that, right? Okay, but then you've got Apple Music that actually does it by first name of the artist, and that drives me nuts when I'm going through my iPhone and my digital music and I get Alice Cooper under A. But is Alice Cooper, the original albums that was a band, they could go under A, right? And then do you put all of Alice Cooper solo under C? I tend to keep mine all together, but you can really start breaking down and getting into things like that. The next thing is bands that have the word the at the beginning. The Cult, the Beatles, right? Do they go under T as digital streaming services do, or do they go under C for Cult and B for Beatles? And I kind of harken back to how it was when I worked in record stores and early on. Cult is under C, Beatles is under B, Alice Cooper is under C because he has more solo albums than he did band albums, and otherwise all artists are just where they belong. Rob Halford goes under H, Billy Idol goes under I, Judas Priest goes under J. Jethro Tull is a band, not a person, so it goes under J. Marshall Tucker Band goes under M because Marshall Tucker Band is a band, not a person again. So we have a lot of things like that, and some of that just comes down to Google it, Wikipedia, look up the band if you're not entirely sure so that you know. Now, as I was talking before, my collection, I've got over 11,000 CDs. I've chosen to break it down via genre. But I can only fit 4,500 CDs out on these shelves that you see behind me here. The rest, 6,500, has to go into storage, and that can be a challenge in and of itself. Okay, and like downstairs, I've got some added storage up here. There's a closet there, and if we go inside this closet, and let me open it. Sorry for the noisiness there. You can see I've got a bunch of stuff in here. Box sets. I've got other boxes in bins, how I choose to store them all by one artist. And then I've got all of these white boxes here. I've got another closet that's much like this. Each of those boxes holds 90 CDs, and I'm going to talk more about them in just a little bit. Okay, step 2, breaking the collection down into manageable amounts. I talked about having only able to get the 4,500 out here, so I have to find another way to do it. You saw some of that in the video that I was just showing you things. And so I decided to pull certain artists together. So I've got boxes like these that hold 30 CDs. This is my Scorpions collection, and I have that. And then you saw bigger boxes like these. This has my Deep Purple in it. And so I've decided to break out whole artists or whole collections by particular artists. So in this case, as an example, Deep Purple. Now, Deep Purple has had so many different members in it and a lot of offshoots, and some major bands sprung from them, like Rainbow has Richie Blackmore in it, so a direct connection there. White Snake with David Coverdale. He sang on 3 of the albums for Deep Purple. Then you got bands like Gillan, namesake Ian Gillan, who is the most popular vocalist of Deep Purple. But then when we get into this here, we've got Rainbow. And so we'd also throw solo albums into this, but do we also put Ronnie James Dio, who was in Rainbow, in there? Do we put Joe Lynn Turner in, who sang for both Rainbow and Deep Purple? Ian Gillan was also in Black Sabbath. Do we put Black Sabbath in this collection? And again, this all comes down to you, but I draw the line where there are direct connections and not these sort of side tangents and things. So Ian Gillan, the band, was basically a solo thing under his name, so that's still Ian Gillan. When he joined Black Sabbath, that's clearly Black Sabbath, not Deep Purple. I have a box for Black Sabbath, so it stays over there. I don't want to break up my Black Sabbath collection. Now, Ronnie James Dio being in Rainbow, he could be here, but I don't feel that Dio's music is the same as Deep Purple's. It's really a different style. It's not that sort of blues rock related, so I pull that out. Joe Lynn Turner, on the other hand, who actually was in two different bands, both Deep Purple and Rainbow, that are related here, I've gone ahead and put all of Joe Lynn Turner as a solo artist in with my Deep Purple collection. Then the question becomes, with Whitesnake, because there are so many people related to Whitesnake, does all of that go in here, or really should Whitesnake get its own box? And these are just ways to think about how it is that you're going to store your collection, having these different boxes. And by the way, if you like the boxes that you're seeing here, I have done a separate video of how to make these boxes because they are cut down. So I will leave a link in the description to that, how to make the best CD storage box, another how-to video for you. But might help you do a little bit of better organizing as well. And so other categories and things that I have in these white boxes, and those white boxes hold 90 CDs a piece in them. I've broken out guitar instrumental albums. I chose to do that so that when I'm in the mood just for that, I can pull that box out. And that's kind of how I think about this. When I'm in the mood for Deep Purple and I want all related Deep Purple things, it's all together in one box, not taking up 90 spots on the shelves behind me. So that's how I partly make that determination and why I can go from 4,500 that are out there to storing away 6,500. I've got a new wave box. I've got one of newer rock bands of the last decade or so. And then I've always got a box of latest purchases. Because for me, at least, when I'm thinking about, I've got nothing to listen to, I really kind of want something new, I like to go back to that box and open and go, wow, I didn't really give that one enough listen. I'm going to do it some more and enjoy it that way. So there's different ways that you can go about this, breaking it down, but that's just some of the ideas and things that went into my collection and breaking it down so that I didn't kind of overflow everything out here. Finally, step 3. Determine if you want your entire collection by one artist on display. So we were just talking about that, where these boxes hold 90 CDs. So if I've got a Deep Purple box of 90, and I've got a box of Yes that's 150, that would take up a lot of space out there. So for me, I very often don't put all of one artist out on display on the shelves. You could do it by going, say, the original era of a band, maybe before they broke up and got back together, the heyday of a band. You could do favorite time period of an artist. If, like me, I like the Ian Gillan years, so not so much the early stuff and not always the stuff that came later. You could choose to do that. You could choose to just put studio albums out, nothing else. For me, I oftentimes try to keep a catalog together if I can, whether it means it's on the shelf or it goes into one of the boxes. I don't really like to split it up. But if I'm going to do that, oftentimes what I'll do to make room is I will pull off live albums and greatest hits collections, compilations, things of that nature, and just keep the core studio albums out. But I'm a big studio album fan. You guys might be big live album fans. Maybe the live albums are more important. Maybe the live albums are just as important. Again, that's where it all comes down to personal preference as to what you're going to choose to keep out, what you're going to have on display, and so forth. So in closing, ultimately it all comes down to personal preference, as I've said a number of times during this video here. Whatever it is that works for you is okay. But hopefully these things that I've talked about here, these considerations and decisions and determinations that I went through to try and figure out and organize my collection, I hope that it gives you a starting point yourself and it gives you some key things to think about and all so that you can figure out the best way to organize a music collection for yourself. All right, everyone, hopefully you enjoyed this video, and if you did, please remember to comment, like, and subscribe. Let me know your thoughts. Have a great day, and I'll talk to y'all real soon. Bye-bye, everyone.